The sound of the vase shattering didn't just echo through the hallway, it sliced through the air like lightning. 1 second, the world was still. Perfect. Untouched. And in the next, everything broke. Glass scattered across the marble tiles, glittering in the chandelier's glow like fallen diamonds. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was accusing. It was loud. It screamed louder than any words could. Mrs. Adelaide Beaumont stood frozen in place, her perfectly manicured hand hovering in midair, as if even she couldn't believe what she was looking at. The woman who owned everything suddenly looked like she had lost something she could never replace. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Her emerald silk gown shimmered in the light, but her face, usually composed and polished, was stiff with disbelief. That vase wasn't just decoration. She had told the story 1,000 times to her guests. How it had been passed down from her grandmother. How it had been hand-carved. How it had come all the way from Austria before the war. She used to brag that if the house burned down, she would save that vase before her jewelry. And now, it lay in ruins. Across from her stood Naomi. Small. Still. Trembling. The kind of presence most wealthy people forget exists until something goes wrong. Her uniform was pressed but faded. Her shoes were old but clean. She had spent 3 years working inside this mansion, and yet had never once dared to walk on this particular side of the hallway unless she was cleaning it. And now, she was standing beside a crime scene. Her mouth opened slowly. I didn't do it, she whispered. Her voice wavered like a child confessing fear, not guilt. She wasn't just pleading innocence. She was pleading identity, begging not to be seen as what Adelaide was already deciding she was. But Adelaide did not blink. She didn't ask how. She didn't ask why. She didn't ask anything. To her, the answer was obvious, not because of logic, but because of status. Because Naomi was here. And people like Naomi were always guilty. "You're finished," Adelaide said, her tone as cold as the glass beneath her heels. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Soft words from powerful people hit harder than screams. "Pack your things." No. It didn't matter that Naomi had been on time every day. That she had worked holidays while everyone else celebrated. That she had once stayed late to help Adelaide's son find his missing dog. None of that mattered. In this moment, she was just someone to blame. Someone to push out. Someone disposable. Naomi swallowed hard. She wanted to explain. To fight. To say check the cameras. To say look at me. But her throat tightened. Words died before they could form. She nodded slowly instead, because that's what years of being talked down to does. It teaches silence. The echo of her footsteps had barely faded when the front doors opened and the first wave of charity gala guests walked in. Laughter. Perfume. Champagne glasses clinking. They hadn't even taken off their coats, and yet they sensed tension. They turned their heads like a pack of wolves catching scent of vulnerability. Their eyes scanned the hallway. Shattered glass. A maid. A furious hostess. They didn't need the full picture. They constructed their own. And they liked it. Some smiled, those cruel little smirks people hide behind sympathy. Others whispered behind jeweled hands. Did she really? How careless. I always wondered if she was trustworthy. Not one of them said maybe there's more to the story. Not one said let's wait before judging. Naomi walked through them like a ghost. Not seen. Only noticed. One guest made a point to step aside dramatically, like Naomi carried a disease. Another whispered loud enough for her to hear, "This is why you don't let them near expensive things." Them. Not staff. Not employees. Them. Naomi kept her eyes forward, refusing to let a single tear fall. She had cried before. Alone. In private. But not here. Not in front of these people who would take pleasure in it. But her chest burned. Her throat ached. She held her breath just to stay composed. She passed by Marcus, the butler. He didn't speak. He couldn't. But his eyes followed her with something no one else had shown her that night. Respect. Meanwhile, Adelaide swept across the hallway toward her guests, her face rearranged into social perfection. She didn't want her evening ruined. Not her gala. not her spotlight. She needed control back. Fast. Terribly unfortunate incident, she announced with a performance-ready sigh. My maid broke my family's heirloom. I simply had no choice but to let her go. Let her go. As if she were doing her a favor. Gasps and condolences followed. They reacted more to the broken vase than the broken woman walking upstairs with her career in a bag. Naomi reached the top of the servant staircase with slow, heavy steps. She could still hear their laughter downstairs. Their toasts. Their sympathy for Adelaide. She entered her small room, barely bigger than a walk-in closet, and sat on the edge of her narrow bed. Her hands shook as she gathered her folded uniforms. She packed them carefully, even now. She paused when she reached the photo tucked inside her drawer. Her son, Malik, smiling widely with 2 missing front teeth. She stared at it until her eyes blurred. I didn't do it, she whispered again. But this time, it wasn't a defense. It was a prayer. She imagined having to tell him she lost her job. That she couldn't pay tuition next month. That she might have to move. She covered her face with her hands. For the first time since Adelaide shouted those words, she cried. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just soft. Exhausted. Hopeless. And while she cried, while the guests downstairs danced and gossiped and praised Adelaide for handling the situation, a small red light blinked quietly from the corner of the hallway ceiling. Unnoticed. Unacknowledged. Recording everything. Because truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it waits. Patiently. Silently. Until the right moment to roar. And before the night was over, that moment would come. Everything Naomi lost tonight, she would get back. With interest. Naomi sat on the edge of her twin bed in the tiny room at the far end of the servants' wing, the room Adelaide always referred to as the quarters, as if saying bedroom would make it sound too human. Her suitcase lay open beside her, half filled with neatly folded uniforms she had washed and ironed that very morning. Her hands shook as she tucked in her apron, pressing it flat as though obeying one last rule. Even after being accused. Even after being humiliated. She still moved with care. With discipline. Years of training. Years of swallowing pride just to survive. But tonight, her chest burned. She could still hear Adelaide's voice echoing in her head like a judge's gavel. You're finished. No investigation. No hesitation. She had tossed her away like spoiled food. Naomi's eyes stung, but she wouldn't let the tears fall. Not yet. She clenched her jaw, forcing herself to breathe slow. She told herself to stay calm. To walk out quietly. To disappear with grace. But then she heard laughter. Not from joy. From mockery. It came from the hallway, a group of Adelaide's rich friends lingering outside her door like spectators at a zoo. Imagine being fired in front of the whole party. I'd just die. Oh please. She should be grateful she even got to work here. Honestly, these people always pretend to be innocent. These people. Naomi closed her suitcase gently, then stopped. Her eyes lifted toward the ceiling. The security camera. She remembered it suddenly, a small device Adelaide had installed months ago after she claimed the gardeners were too curious. It sat quietly near the corner of the chandelier, always blinking red, always watching. Adelaide had bragged about its clarity. Even a fingerprint won't escape it, she'd said. Naomi's breath caught. If it saw everything, then it saw the truth. Her pulse quickened, not from fear this time, but from something new. Resolve. She stood. Not shaking now. Not timid. She walked past the door, past the gossipers who fell silent at the sight of her. They expected her to lower her head, to scurry past like a guilty animal. Instead, she looked them dead in the eye. Not with anger. Not with violence. With certainty. They moved aside without a word. She descended the grand staircase, the same staircase she used to polish every week until it gleamed like melted gold. The gala music played softly in the distance. Champagne glasses clinked. Perfume floated through the air like smoke. And there, at the center of it all, stood Adelaide Beaumont. Smiling now. Already entertaining as though nothing had happened. As though she hadn't just destroyed someone's life. Naomi approached slowly. Conversations stalled. Heads turned. Some held their breath. Adelaide noticed the attention before she noticed Naomi, and when she finally did, her smile vanished. "You're still here," she said sharply. "I told you to." "The vase," Naomi interrupted softly. Gasps fluttered through the room like startled birds. Naomi had never interrupted Adelaide before. Adelaide's nostrils flared. "Excuse me." Naomi didn't waver. "You said I broke the vase. But you didn't even check the camera. The one you installed. It saw everything." Silence swallowed the room. For the first time since Naomi had met her, Adelaide looked unsure. Her composure faltered, just slightly, like a crack in polished marble. "I don't need to check anything. I know what I saw." "No," Naomi said, voice firm. "You know what you wanted to see." A murmur rolled through the guests. A few glanced toward the chandelier, where the tiny red light continued to blink patiently, like a witness raising its hand. Adelaide's lips tightened. "Fine. If that's what it takes to shut you up." "Harold." Her husband, quiet, balding, always standing 3 steps behind her, hurried over. "Pull up the security footage," Adelaide demanded. "Let's settle this." Harold hesitated. "But dear, perhaps we shouldn't. Now." He swallowed and obeyed, retreating toward the security monitor hidden behind a decorative panel in the wall. Guests gathered closer, drawn like moths to flame. Some curious, some uneasy, some eager for entertainment. The monitor flickered to life. The footage appeared. They watched the moment Naomi entered the hall to place fresh flowers on the side table. They watched her wipe dust from the vase carefully, gently, as she had done 100 times before. Then they saw movement. Not from Naomi. From the other side. A man, one of the wealthy guests, stumbling drunkenly backward while texting on his phone. His elbow struck the vase. It wobbled. It fell. Shattered. Naomi jumped back in shock, hands raised, untouched. The man glanced around. Then he hurried away. No guilt. No apology. Just escape. The room erupted. Gasps. Shouts. Eyes swung toward the guilty man, now pale, sweating, frozen beside the buffet table. Someone whispered his name. Others hissed. Naomi didn't move. She just stood there. Calm. Still. Adelaide's face drained of color. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Harold looked at her. Not with obedience this time. With disappointment. The guests stared at Adelaide now, not as a queen to admire, but as a tyrant exposed. Naomi finally spoke, not to Adelaide, but to the crowd. "When I first came to this house, I thought if I worked hard, if I stayed quiet, if I followed every rule, maybe I'd earn respect." Her voice cracked slightly, but she kept going. "But respect isn't something people like me are given. It's something people like her decide whether we deserve." She turned to Adelaide slowly. Her mother. By her grandmother. By every black woman who had ever carried bruises on her back and dignity on her face. Her niece peeked over the counter. "Are you gonna meet her?" Naomi didn't answer at first. But her silence was not confusion. It was consideration. Finally, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "But on my terms." 2 days later, a sleek black car pulled up outside the old brick community center Naomi had chosen. Not a mansion. Not a hotel lounge dripping with gold. A humble space filled with folding chairs, painted murals, and the echoes of laughter from kids' basketball practice in the next room. Adelaide stepped out slowly. No pearls. No couture. No entourage. She wore a plain cream coat, her hair in a soft bun. Not styled. Simply pulled back, as if too much elegance would feel disrespectful now. Inside, Naomi stood waiting. No cameras. No audience. Just 2 women, former employer and former maid, now face to face with nothing left between them but truth. Adelaide stopped a few steps away. "I didn't expect you to agree," she said softly. "I didn't expect you to ask," Naomi replied. The silence between them wasn't cold this time. It was sober. Heavy with unspoken history. Adelaide swallowed hard. I came to say what no press release could fix." Naomi crossed her arms, not in defiance, but in strength. "Then say it." Adelaide's lips trembled, but her gaze did not avert. "I was wrong. Not just for what I accused you of, but for how I saw you. Or rather, how I didn't see you." Naomi didn't soften. "Not yet." Adelaide continued. "I believed my wealth made me immune to fault. I thought power meant being unquestioned. But it only made me blind." Her voice cracked. "I embarrassed you. Stripped you of your dignity in front of people who didn't deserve to judge you. And you still stood taller than me." Naomi inhaled slowly. She heard truth in those words. Not rehearsed. Not polished. Raw. She let Adelaide sit with her own guilt for a beat longer before speaking. "You fired me like I was nothing," Naomi said. "But the world decided I was something. Not because of who I worked for, but because of who I was when you tried to break me." Adelaide nodded, a tear spilling down her cheek. "I know I can't erase what I did. I can't expect forgiveness. But I can change. If you'll allow me to learn. From you." For the first time, Naomi's posture eased. She saw not the woman who had humiliated her, but a woman who had finally been humbled. Naomi stepped closer, not to embrace, but to establish terms. "I don't forgive easily," she said, "because forgiveness without accountability is emptiness. So if you mean what you say, prove it." Adelaide straightened. "How?" Naomi didn't smile, but her eyes gleamed with purpose. "You host charity balls for strangers across the globe. Now host one for the workers in your own city. Housekeepers, janitors, waiters, drivers, the people who keep your world standing." Adelaide blinked. Not with offense, with awakening. Naomi continued. "I want a fund. Legal support. Training. Something real. Something lasting." Adelaide nodded slowly, tears drying into determination. "Done. And I want you to lead it." Naomi froze, then laughed in disbelief. "You want the woman you fired to run your foundation?" Adelaide met her gaze, steady, sincere. "I don't want you to run my foundation. I want to fund yours." Naomi's breath caught, not because she wanted power, but because she realized something more powerful than revenge. She had influence. And now, she had leverage. They didn't hug. They didn't cry into each other's shoulders. That would have been too easy. Too neat. Instead, they walked out of the community center with quiet dignity. Side by side. Not as friends. Not yet. But as two women who had chosen transformation over bitterness. Word of the meeting never leaked. No paparazzi caught it. No microphones recorded it. It existed only between them. Until months later, a new headline emerged. Former housekeeper launches national initiative for workers' rights, funded by unexpected ally. Pictures showed Naomi at a press conference, standing proudly behind a podium. Next to her, not in front of her, not overshadowing her, stood Adelaide. Not speaking. Not leading. Just supporting. Silent where she once would have commanded. Present where she once would have dismissed. Naomi's voice rang through the hall like a bell. "I was fired before I was heard. But my story is not special. Millions of workers face the same fate. Today, we begin building a world where dignity isn't handed down from the rich, but upheld by all." The crowd rose to their feet. Not for spectacle. For respect. Because sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it isn't revenge. Sometimes justice is transformation. The world expected Naomi to destroy Adelaide. Instead, she elevated herself and made Adelaide rise with her. Thanks for watching this video, and if this story touched your heart, hit subscribe now.